welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Jacob. Today is another great episode, but before we get to our guest this week, I want to do a few podcast plugs. I know I do this every week, but it's part of what I do. You can follow us on Facebook, or you can find us on Facebook, Conversations with Jacob on YT. That's Facebook. Twitter is CWJ Podcast. Our podcasting platforms include iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spotify, Amazon. I think we're on Audible, and we're on just 20 different podcasting platforms. And we're heard in Germany, UK, France, and we're all over the world. You can follow us. Our website is conversationswithjacobpodcast.weebly.com. You can find our upcoming episodes, past guests, posts from the host, and that's my thing, by the way. I came up with it. And you can just, check out the website. I'm still working on it. Also coming up in 2 weeks from today, it's our Halloween special with the radio medium, and her name is Laura Lee. That airs October 30th at 1 p.m. So, and joining me today is Savannah Hauk, and she's a gender advocate. So, Savannah, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. That was quite the rundown you had there.
Yeah,
very impressive.
Yeah, I like to keep it kind of, kind of quick.
You did good.
Oh, thank you, appreciate it. So, I guess the first question right off the bat, and when did you start cross-dressing?
When I was 6 years of age. Barely into watching television on Saturday mornings. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say I was dressing at 6, but the attraction and the kind of pull to the feminine was definitely very early on in my life.
So was it something that you always wanted to do, or did you just kind of walk into it?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess you could call it walking into something because, at 6 years old, I mean, what do you know? I knew my parents, I knew my sister and brother, I knew the neighbors. But like, there was something about like the clothing after it was on the bed, after it was being folded from the laundry, and seeing like what my sister was wearing. And there was just this like kind of attraction and magnetism to wanting to try on those things for myself. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I wanted to. And I was too young to know I shouldn't. So, which is kind of a good thing, is right. It's like I was too young to know there was something wrong with it, according to society. And so I actually had never had like a shame spiral about wanting to do it.
Now, when you was cross-dressing, did you get any, hate or criticism?
Well, I kept myself very hidden for about 20 years. Except for maybe a girlfriend here and there, eventually my wife. Prior to that, it was just me. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I thought it was just me. I'd seen it. I'd seen Tootsie. I saw Some Like It Hot. I saw Mrs. Doubtfire. I saw all these men dressed as women in entertainment, but none of it actually spoke to me because they were all doing it for another reason outside of, they're doing it like to see their kids, to get a job, to have a place to stay, to get the girlfriend, and get in her inner circle. Those were all things that they put on a dress to achieve something. And none of that ever spoke to me as a person. So while I knew it existed, I just didn't know how it fit for me.
Now, when you're in a relationship, and how does that affect you, dressing up?
It depends. It depends on the person. Depends on if you told them or not. It depends on how they feel about it. If they're an ally to the queer community, or they just can't wrap their brains around what it is you're doing. I've run that full gamut for many girlfriends, other than my marriage, where she didn't know until a little bit later in our courtship. Every other relationship I've ever had, they've known from the moment we got serious that this is part of who I am. So I had one relationship that seemed very on board and very supportive at the beginning. And then over a span of 15 years, I found myself deeper in the closet than ever before. And then with my current girlfriend now, we've been together 9 years. And it's just been a kind of shooting star point of origin journey that we're we're still trying to figure things out and how it fits. Even for me dressing up, she still thinks it's sometimes her brain has to think about it for a second when she sees me dressed this way. Because usually, 85% of my life is male centric. I go to work, I have the relationship with her. Most of my friends and family, they all see me as Chuck, as a biological male. And being here with you or other things I do typically on Sundays, those are my routine days to be Savannah.
So when you go out with your girlfriend or whoever, do you dress up as Savannah?
I have.
All right.
I have, yeah. Especially with this relationship, we've gone to. I've had birthdays, and we've gone to a restaurant. I was dressed as Savannah. There was some time where I was doing some sort of advocacy or something, and I said, "Oh, let's just go to dinner." So we just went, as opposed to me like, dropping everything off and spending another hour to get ready back as Chuck. We've gone to parties together. We've gone to dinners with other cross-dressing partners. So yeah, we do it, but typically, it's got to be a balance. It can't just be all of Savannah or all of my male side, but mostly it's the male side that she goes with.
Now, can you tell us about your TED Talk?
What about it? What do you want to
know? How was, I guess, anything you want to share about it?
Well, it definitely fell into my lap. It was one of those bucket list items I never thought would actually happen to me. I love TEDx and TED Talks, and they say so much for the person who's actually having a talk and so many different subjects. So for me, a friend of mine had one on LinkedIn. They shared that they had one. And it's like, oh my God, I want to do that too. And then in the comments, somebody responds and says, oh, I can help you with that, because that's what they do. They're an agency that helps people get TEDx talks. So all of a sudden, here I am trying to figure out what it is I want to talk about myself in this as Savannah. And it was really about the journey of overcoming fear, being true to yourself. At the very end of my first TEDx, it was about how my parents still don't know after all these years. I'm over 50 years old, and my dad passed away never knowing about this side of me, never knowing I wrote books, never knowing I have a podcast. I did 2 TEDx's. So there was a lot of things I wish I could have shared with my parents that unfortunately they are not really supportive of the queer community. So as a result, I've kept it as low key and down low as possible.
All right. Now with you dressing up, and do you have any fears?
Oh my God. Okay. Well, when I go out as Chuck outside my door, I never have any fear because I'm a cis hetero white male with all the privileges. So I never thought one about my safety, other than I'm not going to that biker bar at 3 a.m. But going out to Savannah can be fearful every time I walk out the door. And it is fearful. It is something I've been conditioned to believe, that there is lots of hate, lots of misunderstanding, lots of ignorance, a lot of hatred. I'm an abomination to God, according to the Bible. These things all weigh on you. So every time I go out, there was a lot more fear before. Remember, I've lived in South Carolina now. I moved from New York to South Carolina, and I spent 6 months in utter fear for like even bothering to go out. So I stayed at home, didn't go anywhere, and then realized as I went out more and more and more, realizing that my perception of what the South was like was just as ignorant as what I thought they would think of me. And it's been very lovely, but there's always fear. And it's just exposure to going out, going places, going to stores, going to Lowe's, going to Home Depot, just going out and realizing, other than a bunch of different looks that people could give you, if you are doing your best to blend in, you can still stand out, but if you can blend yourself into the world and what it expects, in that way, I've done a fair job of being safe.
Now, you mentioned that you moved from New York to South Carolina. Could you tell a difference, I guess, on how you was treated?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. What I was saying was, like, in New York, I had a very culturally was accepting, but yet even in New York, if you go out to the ends of Long Island, it's not as accepting for a queer community as you think it should be. But again, yeah, a lot of people that can interact with. You can go to the clubs, go to dinners, go to private events. But I was never as visible as coming down here, because there aren't that many clubs that are LGBTQ friendly. There aren't too many organizations or membership groups that you can join. So I was kind of thrust into the limelight, so to speak, just to have my moments as Savannah. And as a result, I go to Starbucks. I just go to normal places, everyday places, get my laptop, do my work, do my podcast editing, whatever it is, and just realize that most people are self-absorbed. They don't care about what you're doing as long as you're not being over the top or gratuitous or just, I don't know, really insulting their sense of well-being. Most people have been lovely.
Now, would you consider yourself, I guess, a transgender, or would you can just, what do you consider yourself as?
Good question. The transgender umbrella encompasses and covers many different gender types. I am a crossdresser, but that is not my gender. Crossdressing is an action. It's not a verb. It's not a noun. So I crossdress, but I'm not a crossdresser. Let's simply put. So that's why I say I'm dual gender, because I am very happy in my biological male body, but this is part of me that I need to express from time to time. So being dual gender or bigender or gender queer or gender fluid or non-binary or gender non-conforming, you could say all 4 or 5 of those things that I could be really so closely associated to. But I'm also transgender, because transgender is a large umbrella that all of us live under as diverse gendered folks. But also, just as a side note, transgender is also a subgroup under that umbrella that is really more tailored to the transitioning folks. Used to be transsexual, and transsexual is not really a popular word anymore. So they adopted transgender because they are taking a transgender journey for either medically or chemically or cosmetically to like feel more a part of their body. So those are people who are also called transgender, but we all live under a bigger transgender umbrella too.
Now, now, when you dress up and get all ready, and how long does it usually take you to get ready?
Well, you were lucky because it only took me 70 minutes to get ready for you.
Oh.
But it's gone down from like a 2-hour affair from shower to this. And now I could do it probably in like, on a good day, 70, 80 minutes.
How about that? Now, why do you think people wants to go from why do you think a person wants to go from one gender to the other? Do you think it's because they don't want to be a male or a female anymore? What's your opinion on that?
It's a very diverse question to answer because every journey is different. There are people, phantom leg syndrome, like people come back from war, have an amputation, and they still feel their toes wiggling. Okay, so imagine that in a different way, where you see parts of your body that are foreign to you, or you feel like they should be there because your brain and nerves say that you should have breasts, or it sees your genitals and thinks it's like a tumorous foreign body. Think about that in like kind of in ley lines to a phantom leg syndrome, because phantom limb syndrome is very much the body has been wired a certain way. And if you're not seeing that in your body, that's where a lot of people feel they need to transition to correct that utter dysphoria that they have about themselves. Now, I do not have that. So for me, I am not looking to transition to female in any permanent way. So that is one journey. My journey is I'm biologically male, or you can be biologically female, and just have this desire or this need to express a femininity side or a masculinity side that just needs an outlet. And for me, it is just an outlet. Then you have drag queens who do quote unquote cross-dressing as a performative art. Like they don't live 24/7 walking down the street in these big lashes and bouffant hair and gowns. They do that as part of their performance art. So that's entertainment, and that's what they do. So there's like from all these diverse ways of looking at it, like there's not one just one story about it.
Now, why do you think that the trans community and the gay community, how do you think they get so much hate?
It really depends on where you are in the world, but let's focus on the U.S. Um, Religion, organized religion, what the Bible says, culturally, what the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant kind of way of thinking, where it is very one gender, two gender, male, female. Where there's a lot of cultures, whether it's Native American or in the Pacific Rim or in the Fiji Islands, in parts of Africa, it's like where they think outside of the gender binary of male female, of just having man woman. So there's a lot of things that cause a socially, culturally, worldview, religious indoctrination. All these things shape how you see the world. And as a result, especially here in Western culture, in the Americas, it is predominantly thought that male, female only is the only gender conforming that we should have. Yet nobody ever talks about the other gender outside of that, which is intersex, people who are born with either they're predominantly female, but they have male genitals, or they could be 15 years old and realize that even though they grew up a woman, they have no vaginal canal and no ovaries, and they were never built with that. So their internal physique is actually male. A lot more of that. I mean, there's so many things that bring us to different places, and we could go on for hours about dissemination of like what does it mean? Why do we hate what we don't understand? And I think that's probably really the biggest thing I just said, is that things that people don't understand tend to frighten them.
All right, and since you dress up and kind of go out, do you go to these I guess these meetups or these conventions?
Like pride events?
Yeah, I suppose that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay, because Pride was big in June, where around the country you have parades and people all dressed up in floats and people all dressing garishly and stuff, and just really wave around rainbow flags and so forth. I am not really a pride goer. I'm not a marcher, so to speak. I'm a little more. First of all, I'm old and I can't wear heels for that long in the heat, so I tend to shy away from that. But also for me, my advocacy really comes from my writings and my podcasts and doing conference work and workshops and stuff like that. So I applaud people when they do Pride, because there are so many people in this country who need Pride and need a physical event to go to like understand they're not alone. Because I could live in Iowa and there could be no Pride anywhere within 300 miles. And then you find out that in Topeka, there's a Pride event, and you will spend a week travel and be with your people, be with your community, find out who you are, and be loved for who you are. And so Pride is super important. I just tend to try to do it on a different way, in a more digital way, kind of like what you do.
All right. So on how did you come up with the name Savannah?
It fell into my lap from the skies. When I was in New York, me and my wife were kind of, I don't know, bumping around ideas, and really nothing stuck, because I wanted something exotic but not trampy. I wanted something like not old sounding or not super common. So all these names were being thrown out, like Jennifer and Michelle, and I'm like, no, I don't want any of those things. So I don't know for why, but Savannah just popped in my head one day, and I'm like, yes, that's it. It's unique enough. It's got a little exotic, but not completely exotic. And that was in New York. But then I moved to South Carolina, where every other woman is named Savannah. So I realized that I kind of shot myself in the foot that way. But at least I found my home where my name is very, very popular.
There you go. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Sure. My podcast, I have a co-host, me and my co-host. Her name is Julie Rubenstein. She runs Fox and the Hanger, which is a styling and consultancy for trans folks. We got together on a different podcast that we were both guests of, and we were on a panel together. And so she reached out to me and said, hey, I would love to do this thing. And we didn't know what it was going to be yet, but we wanted to do this thing for the community. And it started off, and there was a couple false starts, and we were going to have transcripts and blogs and all these things. And I was like, why don't we just do a podcast? It's like, we're spending all this time doing the content, but then having to do a lot of work to make it something else. Let's do a podcast. So we just started doing a podcast called the Fox and the Phoenix podcast, which is about the demystifying the cross-dressing experience. And I'm sure very similar to you is that you just have a passion for something, and you get hooked. And for her and I, it is very much that. It's very much talking about our experiences, warming up about things about our day or our week, and then just trying to tackle something either personal to her and I about being an ally, or from one of her clients, or one of my experiences, and then just having a conversation about it. And hopefully it resonates with people or gets them to either ask another question for themselves, or to even say, I think you're wrong, because that's fine too.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Now for someone watching or listening, how would what advice would you give them that, that they are, I guess, kind of in the closet of like cross-dressing? What advice would you kind of give them?
Oh, advice for them. It's tough advice because depending on what age you are, you're going to come at it from different angles. If you're young, I would say find your community, do your research, find valid source material. Don't just assume everything on the internet is correct and true. As we all know, that's not always the truth. Find people you admire, and find places either locally or online that you can embed yourself in and try to find out more about who you are as a person. And now, that being said, that's great for young folks, but older folks who have been married for 25 years and haven't told their wife that they like to dress as a woman from time to time, that's a whole different picture. It's the same premise. You still need to do all that research, understand who you are, understand what it means to you, because if you can't talk about yourself to somebody when you share of yourself, then that conversation is not going to go as well as you think it's going to go. Yeah, we can't just assume that our partners or our loved ones or our families are going to be like, "Oh, I love you for whoever you are." I mean, that's the goal, that's the want. But there are some people who, because they've been told a certain thing about cross-dressing for so many years, it's going to be an uphill battle that you have to now climb with them to get to the truth.
Now, and what are some things, or maybe one thing that people kind of get wrong about the community?
The cross-dressing community, I would say that anytime I usually tell people in all my experiences, all my life, it's typically, "Oh, are you gay? Are you a drag queen? And do you want to be a woman full time?" Those are, and for me, that's a no in all ways. I am not transitioning. I am not a good performer, and I'm not gay. I love my girlfriend. I always love my girlfriends, past and present. So that's never been a problem. I will also say gender has nothing to do with sexuality. Like, just because I want to dress as a woman, I don't magically love men. Like, that's not how putting on a dress works. It doesn't. Yeah, it's like there's all these weird stigmas where you just make these assumptions like, oh, well, if you want to dress as a woman, must want to be a woman. Therefore, you must want to do all the things that women like to do. So there's all these like leaps of logic that are just so untrue. And it's like every experience is different. Every need to dress is different. And so I think the most important thing people should do is ask the questions, because I don't mind anywhere I go. I would love to answer any question you have for me. And that's part of that's part of why I'm in advocacy, is that I'm happy to be that person, to be that poster child, so to speak. So to do that, I'm happy to answer. And the question has to be asked in earnest, with interest, and not with blame, and not with condemnation. And you will find, as with everything in life, not just cross-dressing, that if you come to any conversation with that mentality of interest and openness, you're going to find a lot more than you started with.
Now, and why do you advocate for others?
Well, I'm really advocating for myself first, because I only have myself to use as a role model. But why do I advocate? I advocate because, I don't know, it's just kind of in my lifeblood a little bit. I mean, I did the 2 books, working on 2 more. The podcast is helpful. And I think maybe a lot of it was because when I grew up, I didn't have that. There was no advocacy. There was, but I didn't know where to look. The internet was in its infancy. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, I know exactly where to go for all the resources I need to be the best me. So I think when I came to South Carolina and started really seeing the statistics of young queer kids who were being basically kicked out of their own homes, the statistics for suicide or attempted suicide, for being considered so different that they think the only way out is to end their own life because of the misery and depression they're facing. I think once I really started seeing that in a more of a red mentality of seeing like what young folks are up against, I really felt like, you know what, I think it's probably time for me to really step up and do something more.
Absolutely. Now, can you tell us about your books?
Yes, I have 2 books out, both in the same series. They're called Living with Crossdressing. You can find them on Amazon for digital download and paperback, and also other places for digital download. Those were written as a response to what my girlfriend was going through when she started reading and educating herself, and realizing the books that she was reading really did not help me. Like, they answered questions that didn't have any bearing on the type of person I am. Like, all the books she read was about a person who said they cross-dressed, and then 5 years later they're transitioning to female. Well, that just like really burned and blazed up her fear that I would transition. So in response, I wrote a book that was a little more meaningful for the non-transitioning gender diverse person, because we didn't really have anything in words to speak that language. So that was the first book. And then the second book was more about how to have your self-confidence, how to have be your most authentic and be your most confident, and actually able to have a conversation with somebody else without basically being pushed back down because their belief is stronger than yours.
All right. Now, where can people find you on social media?
Well, I'm on Facebook as Savannah Hauk, also Instagram as Savannah Hauk. Living with Crossdressing is on Facebook. The Fox and Phoenix podcast is on Facebook and Instagram. And you can find, and if you don't want to remember any of that, you can just go to livingwithcrossdressing.com, because that will give you all that resource connection. You also can contact with the site. The TEDx's are on YouTube. You just put in Savannah Hauk TEDx, you'll find both of my TEDx talks. And yeah, I think that covers all my flexing that I have.
Okay. All right. Oh, it's usually at the end of every episode, I like to do like closing thoughts or a statement. Do you got one?
I will say that in today's world, when things are really seems dire and seems a lot of things on that may not support the person you are in your core, I think my closing words would be stay strong, know that you're not alone, and know that, you know, if you're doing no harm to yourself or you're doing no harm to others, that in reality, you're a good person and you're doing the best you can, and you should be the best you are.
Oh, yeah. Well, Savannah, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about cross-dressing, and well, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Thank you so much for having me and reaching out.
Oh, of course, of course. But anyways, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Conversations with Jacob. Tune in next week for another episode, but make sure to tune in 2 weeks from now for our Halloween special, October 30th. Until then, be safe, and we'll catch you in the next episode.